I'll introduce first. So what we're doing with this podcast, it's going to be a once a month podcast where we're going to review a classic nu metal album. And yes, before you get mad at us, they are fucking classics. Okay. And we're going to review one classic nu metal album once a month. It's going to come out for your listening pleasure. And this month we have chosen the seminal classic Limp Bizkit's Significant Other. And we debated back and forth about what we should choose, because I think a lot of people would feel like the obvious choice would be Korn's self-titled album, because that kind of started nu metal. But we thought for both of us, this album kind of represented a peak of nu metal listening, and so that's why we wanted to start with this one. Now, let's get back into Fred Durst finally getting laid, because there's a you know Russell Peters, Bryan, the comedian Russell Peters.
I do. I do.
So my mom, my sweet mother, just assuming because I do comedy that I would like Russell Peters, bought me his autobiography for Christmas one year. Bless her soul. It is not very good. And there is literally a line in it where Russell goes, he's talking about how he's like famous. And he's like, yeah, it was pretty cool once I started to get famous. You know, more girls wanted to be with me, whatever. And I shit you not, he ends a chapter by saying, that was the night I had my first threesome. It was great. It literally says, it was great, exclamation point, and then moves on to a new chapter. And I feel like that this album is basically Fred Durst doing that, but for an entire album.
No, he's doing it the smart way, though, where he's kind of like, well, I'm having a ton of sex, but I'm not like enjoying it too much or anything.
Right.
It's fine. Like, it's fine. But like, you know, I'm not getting like that much fulfillment out of it. It's a very smart way to brag about how much sex you're having.
Yeah, it's the classic Drake. It's the classic Drake thing of like, oh yeah, like how am I supposed to fuck this girl when like 2 hours ago I was fucking a different girl? Like, man, this is real hard for me, or not hard, as it were. It's a crazy album. We're gonna get into the album, but I first think we should probably talk about why we love nu metal so much as a genre, since this is episode 1, and you and I kind of connected because obviously I host Blocked Party, you host Street Fight Radio, and we bonded when you came on our show over nu metal, and then I did a bonus episode of Street Fight, and we connected there as well. And I feel like we're just two brave men who are willing to say that we love nu metal. And I think it's cool because you're older than me by almost a decade, and so we would be coming at it from totally different times. So why don't you tell me and the listeners sort of what nu metal was for you and kind of how you got into it?
It's weird because like, so where I grew up, like in middle school, you had to listen to rap music or everybody would make fun of you. Like, right. You couldn't like listen to rock music or metal or punk, or if you rode a skateboard, everybody would make fun of you. It was like only rap music. It was pretty much an all, like, 60% white school. It was just like, that's the way it was.
Yeah. That's how it works. When your school is predominantly white, everybody listens to rap. We get it. I grew up in the suburbs too, Bryan. Okay.
So I moved on to rock music like in 9th grade because I think it was because I was attractive to like the alternative girls. Like that was basically it. It was like, I got to listen to like this same music that they're into. So I kind of got into like Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and all that crap, but I was like never really super into it. And then my brother went and saw Korn, Danzig, and Marilyn Manson. Well, not in that order. It was actually Marilyn Manson. No, Korn, Marilyn Manson, then Danzig.
Right.
And this was about a week before I got my first paycheck from McDonald's. And as soon as I got it, my brother did not work. And he was like, you should buy that Korn CD because it's very good. And it was like actually the first time anything grabbed me. And it is like the thing that made me obsessed with music from the age of 15 on. Like Korn grabbed. I probably listened to that first album exclusively for 2 years. And then the reason I picked Limp Bizkit here is because like Significant Other was like it was all consuming when it was about to come out. It was like after Follow the Leader, but like everybody was talking about it. And they were like talking, a couple of the articles I read even talked about like this thing's gonna knock the Backstreet Boys off the top of the charts.
And it did. And we're gonna get to that.
And I had been going to these concerts. Like, I'd been going to see Korn and Limp Bizkit in these very small venues, like 500 to 1,000 seat venues. And Significant Other was when it went to arenas. And like, it's a pretty important album. And like, I followed them, you get to be about like 27 or something, and you're like, maybe I should broaden a little bit. And like Deftones like ended up getting me into Radiohead, and I moved away from it. But over the past few years, it's basically all I'm listen to a lot of new metal now that I travel a lot.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I think like I had a sort of a similar awakening, and just like I said, I'm younger than you. I'm 33, so when Significant Other came out, I was 14. And for me, I got into it with Korn, but I remember like, so I had a pretty good musical taste. Like I'd say like grade 4, 5, 6, I was really into like Weezer and Green Day and Blink-182, like that kind of like pop punk sort of stuff. And I remember when I was in grade 6, which would have been in 1996, a buddy of mine had a Korn shirt on. And it was a classic Korn shirt. You might even remember it. It's like 3 bottles of beer, and they're like walking through a door. And then the beer bottle labels say Korn on it. And so this kid wore it to school, and I remember like he kind of got in a bit of trouble because it was like clearly like beer bottles on the shirt. So I remember like the teachers.
John.
Hey, listen.
I just would say that's bullshit. They can't really say it's beer,
Yeah. Hey, I'm not the teacher in this scenario. I am a teacher now, and if someone does wear a beer shirt, I tell them to go the fuck home. But it was like a weird thing where I remember he got in trouble, and then I was like, "What is Korn?" And he was like, "Oh, Korn's a band." And I was like, that is the stupidest band name I've ever heard in my whole life, especially with like, it's spelled with a K, Korn with a K. I was like, are you shitting me? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And he's like, oh no, man, they're like a sweet band. And I was like, dude, there's no, and I'm listening to bands called Weezer and Blink-182. Like, it's not like I was listening to, like old school, like, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Those are real band names. Like, it wasn't like I was listening to like really good music, but he just had those, or like really bands with really good band names. And so I just heard Korn, and I was like, you gotta be shitting me. That's not a band. So I just put it out of my mind. And then in 1998, Freak on a Leash came out. And, it's really hard, I think, people who are younger than us or people who didn't pay attention to nu metal, I think it's hard for them to grasp truly how big it was. And I think you and I talked about this on the Street Fight bonus episode, but it literally, Total Request Live had to change their show because Got the Life and Freak on a Leash were being requested so much that they came up with the idea of retiring songs on Total Request Live for Korn. Like, that's how big that was. So I remember Freak on a Leash came out. It had that amazing Todd McFarlane animated video. And I was like, oh, this is dope. This is the band that Craig had on his shirt. And Craig was always a cool guy. I was like, oh, maybe he was onto something with Korn. And then once I got a hold of Follow the Leader, then it was all over. And then I think exactly what you said. It was weird because nu metal didn't have a ton of bands. So it was kind of like, I got into Follow the Leader, and then I just listened the shit out of Follow the Leader, and then I got into like Life is Peachy and the self-titled album. But then it was like the only other band was Limp Bizkit. So you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm into Korn. Limp Bizkit's kind of doing that. And okay, those are the 2 bands I like. And that's all I listen to. And so for like a good like 4 or 5 years there, that was like legitimately all I listened to. And I remember when people that I knew fell off of Limp Bizkit, I would always kind of be like, oh yeah, like that kind of sucks, like to their face. But in secret, I would always be like, no, but that shit like rips though. Like, it's pretty cool,
I'll say this. I like, because I did go buy the first album in 1995, like a few months after it came out. But like the thing that really grabbed me more than anything was being a dude that went to in 8th grade, was like into hip hop and like NWA and stuff, and then like seeing Korn, like I saw a picture of them before I bought the CD. We went to like a local record store where they would sell us the CDs a day before the release and stuff. And it was like this like really cool, like older guy that would be like, yeah, this stuff's cool. He had a big poster of Korn, and seeing the picture of the guys was like, these are the coolest guys I've ever seen in my life.
Which, like, I think if you and I both looked at those pictures now, we'd be like, how did we think this was cool? Like, I
don't know. I will say that I still think that all these guys look cool. Well, Limp Bizkit is different. Korn looks cool, but Limp Bizkit, I probably wouldn't. Limp Bizkit looks very uncool.
Yeah,
they
never looked cool. That's for sure. But I think, and we'll get into this, I think it's like the band, like Limp Bizkit, the way they were constructed, like they weren't a true nu metal band, really. Like they were Fred Durst and some guys that Fred Durst knew. You know, like it definitely felt more like the Fred Durst show than Korn ever did. Like I feel like Korn always had like unique, like you felt like every guy had a unique personality. You know, it was like Monkey was like kind of outgoing, sort of reminded you of like Kirk Hammett a little bit. Head was like the kind of quiet weirdo who had these crazy dreads. Fieldy was like a cool guy who wore sports clothes, and you're like, yeah, he's dope. David was like in the gym every minute. You're like, oh yeah, he's just like a muscle head. And then Jonathan Davis was like a creepy horror movie weirdo. Like they all had those distinct words. Like Limp Bizkit just kind of felt like, oh, Fred Durst has this personality and everyone else is just like, and obviously Wes with the paint and everything, but yeah, right. It was just, you never felt that it wasn't the same.
My first encounter with them was I saw them open for Korn before they had an album out. And as we walked out, like Fred was handing out CD singles of Counterfeit, Stuck, and Pollution.
Amazing.
We're on there. And there were demo versions of those songs. And me and my friends each grabbed one because it's a free tape.
Right. Yeah, and, of course.
We listened to that fucking thing for months before $3 Bill Y'all even came out. Like, I think that at the time, Limp Bizkit, the reason I wanted to do this album first is like, I think at the time I actually probably liked Limp Bizkit more than Korn, and I kind of thought they were a little cooler. And like, even just listening to this album, it's like they are, I mean, for everything people say about Fred Durst, he does come off like very down to earth when you listen to his music.
No, I agree. And I think what you're saying is really, like, I think the thing that Limp Bizkit had was that they came after Korn, and there's always like a little bit of a like, oh, this is like a cooler, better version of the thing I like, right? And that happens with every pop culture thing, every type of music, every movie thing. You know, it's like, oh, they're doing this thing I really like, but it's like kind of better. And I do agree that Limp Bizkit always seemed way cooler. Like Korn seemed like, oh man, like what do these guys even get up to in their spare time? Whereas like Limp Bizkit, you're like, these guys are fucking in their spare time. Hell yeah.
Right. And when I started dating my wife, when we were 19 in 1998, when this album came out, and like she didn't like Korn at all, you know, but
right.
She liked nu metal. She liked Limp Bizkit a lot. She actually had like a crush on Fred Durst. We used to very weirdly, this is a very weird thing that we used to do that we would never do now, but we would put pictures of people we were attracted to on the wall in our bedroom. This is like we were together for 1 year and we were fucking idiots, you know?
And Fred Durst was on your wall while you were fucking?
She had Fred Durst on the wall and I had Christina Ricci on the wall. Very attracted to her. She was very attracted to him. And that was like the whole, we would be like, oh, you know, hey, well, I bet you'd love to like have sex with Fred Durst. You know?
She's like making you wear a red hat.
Yeah. Well, wasn't even wearing hats at that time. It was crazy. No, but she was like, but like Limp Bizkit was also a concert there were girls at. I know that like this music gets an image for being very male, but like there were girls at Limp Bizkit concerts and there were girls at Deftones concerts, but there were not, you know, Korn concerts were very much like just a bunch of dudes. You know?
Yeah. Korn was like Gamergate, but like 20 years ago.
Yes. It was just
It's like those kind of guys.
It was all. Well, I mean, and I was super into them, so I can't like make fun of the people that were there.
Me too.
I was just always like, I just remember even all my friends being like, "Man, there's gonna be like there's girls at these concerts. Can you believe that?" Like, 'cause, you know,
yeah,
we're
of
so
course.
young. So
yeah.
Like, Limp Bizkit was just like, I think, bigger and people were more willing to listen to him because Fred just looked like a guy. Like, he just looks like a guy. Jonathan Davis doesn't look like a guy.
No.
Chino from the Deftones is like handsome as shit. Fred is like the perfect, just if you were like to computer generate a guy that would do the kind of music Limp Bizkit did, it would come out Fred Durst 100% of the time.
Oh, for sure. Like, the fact that they're from Jacksonville is like the least surprising fact about Limp Bizkit. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.